Man, I cannot believe this is the 4th edition of my underrated games list, even if one of them is long gone by now. Anyways, I'm sorry this video took so long. I wanted to have it done by the new year, but the stupid hacker ruined that, and because I wasn't able to finish it before the deadline, I was no longer in a rush to finish the list. And as I've said many times, it's okay if you disagree with these choices, but those of you who are going to insult me for my choices, just save your breath and let people like what they want to like. That especially goes for the haters of the number 1 entry on the list. Let's get started. Remember when I said in my list of games I wanted to like when I said the worst game I played in 2021 was the Switch version of the original Dragon Quest? Well, you're probably wondering what the best game I played that year was. Well, look no further than Toy Story Racer. Special thanks to Benjamin for introducing me to this game in his obscure Kart Racers series, by the way. And I'm very glad he did, because this game is tons of fun. I can't really give it much compliments other than how it's just an addictive racing game that you might not want to stop playing. It has a pretty neat selection of tracks too. There's tracks like Sid's House, The Neighborhood, Pizza Planet, and even a recreation of Andy's house from the Toy Story 2 PS1 game. So much nostalgia. And even the tracks that weren't locations in Toy Story still don't really feel like filler tracks. Heck, one of the stages, the bowling alley, might be a callback to the scene where Buzz learns that he's just a toy. If you look at the reflection on his helmet after that, you can see that a bowling game was on, so if this is a reference to that, then it's actually a pretty neat callback. There are a few problems though. The battle mode takes forever when it's on an actual track, the pink top is completely useless since you can't control where it goes, and getting stuck at the bottom of a ramp can be pretty frustrating. I'm looking at you, Skate Park, and it practically pulls a World of Light on us by making it take forever to get all the soldiers. Well, at least, unlike World of Light, it doesn't have the same objective every time. Sometimes you come in first, sometimes you have to defeat your enemies, break certain targets, etc. So it doesn't get stale nearly as fast as World of Light. I just wish this game got more attention, because it really deserves to be regarded as one of the great racing games, along with Mario Kart and Crash Team Racing. Out of all the Kingdom Hearts games, 350 in over 2 days is one of the games that people most want to forget about. And I don't think it really deserves that reputation because it's actually quite engaging. It did a good job at getting you attached to Roxas because of just how much you feel for him. Sure, it doesn't introduce any new worlds unless you count being able to actually visit Neverland, and only a handful of songs in the game are actually new, but I've seen people regard this game as even worse than Recoded, and I just don't understand why. So a game that has an actually engaging story and cast of characters is even worse than a game that you could literally just cut out of the Kingdom Hearts series and miss nothing. Sure, let's go with that. And to the people who complain about the combat system being terrible due to the fact that you can only customize your deck between missions, so you have to use the exact same deck for the entire mission, I think you people are exaggerating. It is true that you can customize your deck during missions, but I'd say that would only really be a problem in the longer ones. I don't remember having any issues within the others, except for when we're talking about Ruler of the Sky, and let's be real, that boss would still be terrible even if the combat system wasn't like this. And plus, you get to team up with other members of the organization, and if you count mission mode, you even get to play as other organization members. It may not be one of the better entries in the Kingdom Hearts series, but I think that it's kind of a stretch to call it bad. The Zelda series may be one of Nintendo's most beloved franchises, but not every Zelda game gets the respect they deserve. Okay, granted, not all of them deserve respect, but most do. If you ask me, the Oracle games would have to be the most unfairly overlooked. And to think, Alex actually had the audacity to call them his pick for the most overrated games, despite being nowhere near overrated. These games just have some really neat ideas to them, with the ability to change seasons and travel through time. Which, yes, the latter has been done before in Ocarina, but the past overworld manages to have a lot more noticeable differences from the present world, keeping the overworld from getting too tiresome. The games also have a lot of great puzzles that will really test your wit, as you'd expect from a Zelda game. I just don't know why these games get overlooked. They deserve as much praise as most 2D Zeldas. Maybe someday these games will get the respect they deserve, and may even get remakes like Link's Awakening, though they'll likely waste their potential and have nostalgia-pandering graphics like in the Link's Awakening remake, but at least it'll be something. But until then, they deserve the spot on my underrated games list. One thing that the Kirby games do exceptionally well is when they experiment with different graphical styles, because they give us some pretty sweet visuals, with Dreamland 3's coloring book style graphics, Epic Yarn with its yarn style graphics that make it look incredibly beautiful, and the game that earns the next spot on the list, Kirby and the Rainbow Curse with its claymation-style graphics. And if you haven't already guessed, I think they look really nice, especially since they managed to pull off some really neat effects with them. As for the gameplay, well, it manages to be pretty much what you expect from a sequel to Canvas Curse. Kirby takes on the form of a ball and you use the touchscreen to draw paths for him to travel on, which does shake things up a little from the other Kirby games. It is disappointing that there aren't any copy abilities in the game, but at least we have these neat transformations. And when you transform, you get a callback to Kirby's partners in Dreamland 2. Even as someone who isn't a fan of Dreamland 2, even I'm going to applaud them for giving a shout out to these practically forgotten characters. As for the music, it's also really nice, like you'd expect from a Kirby game. Sure, most songs in the game are either remixes of past Kirby songs or this game's theme, but I'd gladly take that over Canvas Curse's soundtrack, which sounds like they took a CD of classic Kirby songs and threw it into the dishwasher. But unfortunately, Rainbow Curse ended up being one of the more forgotten Kirby titles, even for Wii U standards. And I seem to have been one of the few people who was looking forward to this game when it was announced at E3 of 2014. It didn't even get a Switch port like most Wii U games I know about. And I know the Switch doesn't use a touchscreen, but if the remakes of Okami and Dream Drop Distance were able to find a way around this, surely Nintendo could have thought of something. But unfortunately, it seems like at the moment, there's no rainbow in sight for this game's future. Hopefully someday it gets a remake. That should hopefully help it get the respect it deserves. Princess Peach Showtime is a game that shows that Peach can be useful if she really tries. As some of you may know, I'm sick of Peach constantly getting kidnapped. So when she gets the spotlight, no pun intended, it's only natural that I wouldn't have as much of a reason to complain. And the game itself manages to play very well, with several different types of levels that give some great variety, not only with its environments, which are also really nice, but they also give you a lot of different movesets. So I think it's safe to assume that rarely will you ever get tired of the gameplay. Throwing you into all these cool scenarios such as an old western story, an ice skating show, a mystery, an epic space mission, and even a Tom and Jerry themed boss fight. By the way, fun fact, one of my friends was actually the person who gave Nintendo the Tom and Jerry themed boss fight idea. I'm serious. Kind of a letdown that there are no pirate scenarios, but what can I do? Of course it's not without its faults. The stakes are really low even for Mario standards, since instead of having to save someone or save the kingdom, here you have to save some random show. And yeah, the game is too easy and too short, but I personally don't think it's fair to call a game bad because of that. It can definitely be a reason to dock points, but I don't think that it should be the difference between whether a game is good or bad. And besides, if you're bothered by the difficulty, try 100%ing the game and then talk to me about difficulty. I'd say the difficulty of getting 100% is at least challenging enough, especially the bosses with the conditions they ask you to beat the boss under. Why else do people hate this game? Oh, that's right, because it stars Peach, and according to all of you Generation Zers, anytime a woman does anything awesome, that is automatically woke garbage. I swear, some people nowadays are just completely out of their minds. If men are allowed to be competent, then so are women. There's nothing wrong with that. And between this and Peach's performance in Mario Wonder and the movie, I think we found ourselves in a new renaissance era of Peach actually being useful for once. We better enjoy it while it lasts, because last time Peach seemed like she was finally going to stop being useless, that didn't last for more than a couple years, so let's enjoy it while we can. Bottom line, I believe this game is much better than everyone gives it credit for, and it might even be my favorite game of the year, because it is just peachy. Sorry about that. I'm sorry to say that I don't have much to add about Rumble Racing ever since the 2015 version of my list, but my thoughts on the game are pretty much unchanged. This might just be the least popular game I've ever played, because aside from the time when my parents got this game for me when I was a kid, literally the only times I've ever seen other people talk about it is if I'm actively looking this game up. Yep, the only time I've ever heard about this game aside from being given to me as a kid is when I used the search bar. I don't think I've ever played another game like that. I've even looked up several lists of top 10 PS2 racing games, and this game wasn't even mentioned on a single one of them. So what do I like about this game? Well, it's just a fun game overall. Nothing groundbreaking, but still a neat game regardless. It just has some really neat levels, music, and gameplay, which are the things I look for in a game. With a neat addition of the announcer saying some humorous lines as you play, very rarely have I seen a video game do something like that. The closest I've seen to that is in certain video games where bosses say certain lines during the fight, but they only have like a small handful of lines, so it gets annoying much more quickly than it does in Rumble Racing, where the announcer has probably like dozens of lines. It does lose points because there isn't much to say about this game, but the fact that it's one of the least popular games I've ever played is more than enough for it to get the spot. I don't know if it's just my nostalgia speaking, but it kinda upsets me knowing that Yoshi's Island DS is rarely ever talked about. And even when people do talk about it, they have nothing but complaints towards it. Why they complain about it? Usually it's because of the difficulty. That sounds like a fair complaint, but I could argue that games like Mega Man and Castlevania are a lot harder, yet I never hear anyone complain about their difficulty. I guess it's probably because they just think it's very jarring when compared to the simple difficulty of the first game, which I guess I could understand, but if you look at it on its own, the difficulty is nothing compared to the examples I just brought up. Besides, you never hear anyone complain about Canvas Curse for being hard for Kirby standards, so why is this any different? I could argue that this game is just as good as the original, because it has what made the first game so lovable: bright and vibrant visuals, addicting gameplay, and lovable music. I know that most of the music contains a remix of the main theme, but first of all, I don't care. And second off, only the first halves of the songs are remixes. The second halves of them are completely original compositions. Another thing that makes this game fun is that instead of Baby Mario, you have multiple different babies who all have their own advantages. Baby Peach can allow for floating on wind currents, Baby DK can climb on vines, Baby Wario can attract coins and magnetic blocks, and Baby Bowser can breathe fire. I do kinda wish that Yoshi's speed from the first game wasn't tied to only being able to be used when you're using Baby Mario, but I still think this is a neat mechanic nonetheless. And it even has an enemy museum where you can see enemies outside of their respective levels. That is something you rarely ever see in video games. I guess you could make that argument that Woolly World also had something like that, but that only showed their animations and didn't show them in different habitats or how they behave in response to certain movements or anything like that. This, however, is something that I spent a lot of time coming back to. Though what keeps Yoshi's Island DS from being higher is the previously mentioned difficulty, but in spite of that, I believe that this is a worthy successor to Yoshi's Island, and I feel like it deserves more credit than people give it. Whenever I say that I feel like Sonic Lost World was the last good Sonic game, I get a lot of weird looks. Not just because Mania exists, but also because Lost World wasn't one of the more beloved Sonic games, and I just don't get why. All I'm getting is that it tries too hard to be Mario, and even then, I only see two ways it rips off Mario, as people put it. The first way is that it has a grass, desert, forest, ice, sky, beach, and lava world, which I don't really see as a real issue, and the fact that it has circumnavigatable platforms. Are you honestly kidding me right now? That kind of feature has been used in multiple games before Mario Galaxy. Heck, I can think of a time when a Super Nintendo game did this. Granted, it was only for one boss fight, but that still proves all of you skeptics wrong about how this is a Mario Galaxy ripoff. That's like calling Super Smash Bros. A Crash Bandicoot ripoff because they both have double jumping. So what does this game do right? Bright and vibrant visuals, cool music, and enjoyable gameplay. Not to mention a surprising variety of environments, including some you rarely see in video games. I guess it is kind of a downgrade from Sonic Colors, but that's not saying much when Colors was already an amazing game, so that's a very high bar I would have had to clear. The praise this game deserves is what's really lost here. Guess I should expect as much from a game from Nintendo's most underrated console, so for the probably like 10 of you who own a Wii U, I suggest you at least give this game a chance. Fire Emblem Fates has been widely regarded by pretty much everyone, especially in the Countdown community, as the worst game in the Fire Emblem franchise. Just ask any Countdown artist other than me, they'll say this game's awful. But what reasons do they have for calling the game bad? Because of the lackluster story and narrative. And yeah, I'll admit, in terms of that, it's not one of the better stories or narratives. Because of how it's supposed to be a difficult choice of which side to pick, even though one of those two sides is ruled by an obvious tyrant, the whole point of the pick a side scenario is pretty much destroyed by giving a route that makes them both happy, and because the Revelations route pretty much muddles so many potentially awesome story elements in all three routes. However, the story and narrative are the only things people ever look at in this game for. Pretty much everything else is handled beautifully. The soundtrack is among some of the absolute best in the franchise, which is saying a lot considering the franchise it comes from. As for the characters, I'd say they're handled well. Everyone says this game has the weakest cast of characters in the series, but let's be real, most Fire Emblem games prior to this one didn't have very strong casts of characters. At least unlike the pre-Awakening games, this one actually has a support system, and I'd say these characters are pretty likable. I mean, sure, there are some exceptions.
I'm not a child. I'm a grown man. I'm not a child. I'm a grown man. I'm not a child.
Shut up! Just shut up, you idiot!
But the rest of the cast is not half bad. Sure, they're not as memorable as the ones in Three Houses, but I think that's mainly because most of this game's dialogue isn't fully voice acted like in more recent installments in the series. But what about Corrin? I didn't find him that bad of a protagonist. People keep going on and on about how much of a terrible character he is, especially Green Scorpion, who feels the need to constantly bash on him every single time he gets a chance.
And this isn't even mentioning Corrin, who is one of the worst protagonists in Fire Emblem history. And speaking of Corrin, can we have him be a little less dickish this time around? Seriously, did anyone else notice that in Conquest, Corrin was a bit of a pansy, and in Birthright, he was kind of an asshole? I despise Corrin.
Alright, I get it!
Doesn't help that the only reason he ever brings up for hating Corrin is because of something he does in an optional paralogue. Which, yeah, that's a jerkish thing of Corrin to do, but to treat a small and optional thing like his entire character? That's almost as dumb as when all these morons keep making that stupid claim that Mario constantly sacrifices Yoshi, despite the only time the franchise ever encouraged that being completely optional. Not to mention, Green Scorpion seems less bothered by Corrin's bad parenting and more bothered by his hypocrisy. Sure, Corrin could be a lot better, and he's not as good as Robin, but I still think he gets more hate than he deserves. And the gameplay might just be some of the best gameplay in the entire series. One thing I hate in this franchise is the weapon durability meter, so by removing it, you can use weapons as many times as you want. So you no longer have to worry about being stuck with no weapons and being literally unable to win the fight. And if you're bored with the maps not having enough to do on them, no worries, because the new Dragon Vein ability allows you to alter environments in interesting ways, allowing you to spice things up on the map. Whether it be creating new passageways or making dangerous areas safer to cross, it is definitely a welcome ability to have. Overall, while it may not exactly have the best storytelling in the series, it's a really good game that doesn't deserve nearly as much hate as it gets. Before we get to number 1, let me list off some honorable mentions. Fire Emblem Engage. While not one of the best Fire Emblem games, I think it's underrated overall, just not as much as Fates. Because it doesn't get as much hate, and because I don't remember as much of it as I remember of Fates. Crash Bandicoot The Wrath of Cortex. Believe it or not, this is actually my favorite Crash game, but I feel like that might just be nostalgia bias. Yoshi's Island GBA. Maybe it's just because I grew up with this version, but I think of this as the superior version. Everyone ignores it in favor of the Super Nintendo version, even though this game has much better sound effects, and 6 new awesome secret levels that you'll never find anywhere in the Super Nintendo version. The only reason it's not here is because of my 1 per franchise rule. Majora's Mask 3D. I'm convinced most of this version's haters only hate it because of that jerk Nero for sounding extremely condescending towards this game and its fans, and practically gaslighting everyone to thinking that it's wrong to prefer this version. Paper Mario Sticker Star. I'd have put this on the list since people say it's the absolute worst video game ever. As a matter of fact, I feel like I'm the only person on the entire planet who actually likes it. But in recent years, I've heard people bring up much better reasons for making that claim because of its horrible gameplay choices. But it was still very stupid of everyone to wait almost 10 years before finally bringing up the most valid complaint about the game. And it's also stupid that everyone called it the death of the Paper Mario games before Color Splash and Origami King were even announced, and didn't stop to think that maybe it's just a small bump in the road. And what's worse is that I sometimes get mocked for liking this game. I blame Chugga Conroy for sounding like he's deliberately talking down to Sticker Star fans in his series on that game. It was inevitable. There was no other choice I could have picked for the number 1 spot than Pokemon Sword and Shield. I mean, seriously, I've been defending these games since before they even came out because of toxic brats everywhere treating these games like they were going to be the next Sonic 06. All because it doesn't have every Pokemon in existence, and because its graphics don't live up to Nintendo Switch standards. I can understand people being bothered by this. In fact, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't also angered by the National Dex cut. But over time, I started to get more frustrated with the fans than with the Dex cut when everyone started treating it like the next Sonic 06 and constantly harassing people who were still excited for the game. Trust me, I know. I have been harassed like no tomorrow just for liking these games. Even when I admit liking Sticker Star, I didn't get anywhere near this much backlash. And even when Game Freak brought in a lot more Pokemon that were left behind, everyone was still mad in response to that. This just proves that the haters are not only obsessed with overreacting, but they're also completely ungrateful. And besides, the graphics are only really bad in the open world areas. Everywhere else, they look perfectly reasonable for Switch standards, and even in the wild area, I didn't even notice the graphical issues until everyone went out of their way to look for these instances of poorly rendered graphics and constantly spewed their overreactions everywhere. I know the phrase, a delayed project is eventually good, but a rushed project is bad forever, but everyone has constantly abused that argument to exaggerate this game's flaws. That honestly made me sick of this phrase. But the games weren't even out yet when everyone complained about them. Did the fanbase's toxic behavior stop when the games actually came out? Heck no! They're still as bad as ever. I am still a victim of constant harassment just for liking these games. I mean, sure, the arguments have gotten a little more valid now that we have the admittedly unimpressive story, let alone one that doesn't really take off until the end of the main game, but I'd say that at worst, it's an enjoyable enough Pokemon experience, and at best, it's an overall good time. But people just have annoyingly high standards and think that being slightly underwhelming is enough to treat it like it's the modern equivalent of E.T. for the Atari. Because of how obnoxious this hate base is, I was expecting everyone to have the same toxic reactions to Scarlet and Violet. And you'd think they would, considering how those games have more unpolished instances than Sword and Shield ever would. And yet that generation actually got less backlash than Sword and Shield got. So, what have we learned today? That having noticeably unpolished gameplay in multiple instances is not as bad as having slightly unimpressive graphics and not being able to fit more than 900 Pokemon in one game. Makes sense to me. Even the franchise itself doesn't treat these games with enough respect, considering how little time is spent in Galar and Journeys, and how many characters at Journeys and Horizons completely neglected. I won't deny that these games could have been better if they had more time put into them, but I don't think it's fair to call them anywhere near this bad. Again, if you still hate these games, that's okay, but just how obnoxious these games haters act is more than enough for me to call these the most underrated games ever.